Hey everyone, SunTide here. Hope you all are doing great. I definitely am, especially since Monster Hunter Wilds came out and has, unsurprisingly, turned out to be a really good game. Especially once you hit high rank. Low rank was less good, but still a good game, still fun. So, if you're new here, welcome. I'm SunTide. On this channel, talk a lot about video games, about science, and about the weird interface between the two. So for Monster Hunter specifically, I talk a lot about set building, about finding the best combination of weapons, armor, skills to maximize your damage and make it as easy as possible to defeat all the different monsters in this game. Before I go into full builds though, I wanted to make this video a quick spoiler-free summary of all the different weapon and armor skills that increase your damage, which ones are really good, which ones are less good, and which ones you should be trying to fit into your builds. I'll also do a very quick summary of how damage works and how we start deciding which skills and which sets are good and which ones are less good from a damage perspective. If you don't care so much about damage, that's okay. Knowing these things are still good, but you can always put skills that maximize your defense, increase your armor. That's all perfectly fine. There is no one right way to play a game. Okay? Just want to get out of the way. I like doing as much damage as possible. I like the damage numbers, and if you do too, you're in the right place. So yeah, now if you are new to Monster Hunter as well, welcome. So damage is relatively complicated. There's a lot of different factors that go into how much damage you do. On the set building side, I'd say there are 5 main factors that affect things. So those are raw damage, or attack. So if you pause the game, you can see on the right of your screen, an attack value, so I have 231 right now. There's also sharpness, so that's the whole different colors you see, a bit lower, so from left to right, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and white. White is the best one. You want to be on that for as long as you can. You also have affinity, which in other games would be called critical chance, so my affinity right now is 0%. If you do land a critical hit, you'll do 25% extra damage by default, but there is a skill you can have to increase that damage to a higher value. I call that factor critical damage. It can go up to 40%, so you do 40% damage for a critical hit. The last factor is element, so you can see that right now I have 300 ice element. In this video, we aren't going to be talking about element very much because it's a bit more complicated, sort of needs its own video, so we're going to be talking about these first 4. And what's cool and interesting about these first 4 is that they all affect one another. So what I mean by that is if you have high raw or attack, then affinity becomes more important because the affinity increases and multiplies all of your raw damage. Of course, if your affinity is really high, then critical damage becomes very important. You want to do more damage on the criticals that you land, right? So set building is always a compromise between all of these different factors, which makes the math a bit more complicated and interesting and fun to do. Now what makes designing the builds a bit more easy in Monster Hunter Wilds though, is that they've split skills into 2 types. They split into armor skills and weapon skills. So armor and weapons give different skills now. So armor skills are generally conditional increases to raw or affinity, or are just nice defense bonuses. So you can get them on your armor sets, you can also get them on talismans and via decorations that you put in your armor. The other thing that you can do is you can have skills on your weapons now, and you can put decorations on your weapons. And these skills increase raw or affinity, but they can also increase sharpness, critical damage, or element. Additionally, your increases to attack, to raw or affinity can also be flat bonuses. They can be unconditional, they can just always increase these stats, which is a bit more consistent. So what we're going to do to figure out which skills are good and which skills are less good is that we're going to try and calculate how much damage each skill point increases. So this avoids comparing apples to oranges, comparing raw to affinity. What we're going to do is we're going to start off with this sort of basic build, a basic build with around 230 raw and 40 affinity, and then see how much, say, 1 point of attack boost increases it, or how much 1 point of weakness exploit increases our damage. That way we can compare damage to damage, which is much more easy and realistic to do. I'll be giving caveats if this number changes, that way we can just have an understanding of how good each skill is in different situations. This video will be mostly focused on the longsword, because that is what I am most focused on and what I'm best at, I think. But it should be generally relevant for other weapons as well. But I'll let you use your own intuition for that, or let you look at other weapon experts for that. So skill-wise, we're going to split this video into 4 main categories. They're going to be the weak armor skills, the good weapon skills, the good armor skills, and the best skills that you should always be trying to get. First off, the weak armor skills, or what I would call the conditional armor skills. These are the armor skills that you can use. They will increase your damage, but they're less good. Don't really prioritize them unless you have to. So, one of them is peak performance, and this is probably the best one. So what peak performance does is it increases your attack if you are on max health. So the first point increases your attack by 3. Later points increase your attack by 5 per level. This means that the later skill points are really good. Overall, though, it only adds to your overall damage by 0.6 to 0.9%, assuming you can have 50% uptime. If you have it active for more than that, it's better. Less than that, it's worse. What's interesting about peak performance, though, is that in Monster Hunter Wilds, you're getting a lot more knockdowns than you have in previous games, because you can break wounds and whatever else. And if you do that, and you have some sort of healing skill, it's actually relatively straightforward to have max health when you're doing a lot of damage. Which means the uptime can be pretty high if you're fairly good at the game, but it is less reliable. It's not as good as later skills, so I wouldn't recommend it so much. The other sort of opposite of peak performance is resentment. So what resentment does is it increases damage if you have recoverable health. So after you take a hit, you have natural healing, you have some red damage, you have some red health on your health bar. When you have this, you get a lot more attack. You get 5 attack per level, which is more than peak performance did at low levels. Which means, in theory, resentment can be better. The problem is it's really hard to maintain consistent uptime, because you'll need to be getting hit a lot. The one exception is, I think, if you are in a hot area or you're standing on lava, you can keep your red bar, which can give you consistent uptime, but that's not sustainable and isn't as good. So resentment can be good if you can maintain red bar, but not necessarily what I would recommend a lot of the time. So yes, it's still a bit conditional. The other conditional skill I'm going to talk about is Foray. So what Foray does is it gives you nice bonuses if the monster is poisoned or paralyzed. So the first skill point gives 6 attack, 6 raw, which is very nice, so it's actually really good. The problem is the uptime. It's very hard to maintain a consistent uptime. If you have around 40% uptime, that's 1% bonus damage, which is decent, but not great. Later points also give affinity, but less raw, and raw is generally a bit more important than some affinity, point for point. And you also need a poison weapon for it to become relevant. If you can somehow maintain Foray uptime, say you're playing in multiplayer and you all have poison weapons, or half poison, half power, Foray could be good, but generally no. You generally want to avoid this skill, again, unless it's free, or if you like the skill. And the last conditional skill I'm going to talk about is Latent Power. So what Latent Power does is when you take enough damage, you get a nice bonus to affinity, 10% per level, which is again very good, but it's hard to maintain uptime. So generally not the best skill overall. So those were the weaker or more conditional armor skills. Now let's talk about some of the weapon skills. There are 2 that are consistently good and consistently add around 1% damage per skill point. They are Critical Eye and Critical Boost. Both of these skills were much better in previous games. In this game, they are less good. One is always going to be better than the other, depending on your current stats. But in practice, you're probably going to be limited by your decorations. So if you have a good Critical Eye decoration and a less good Critical Boost decoration, just put in a Critical Eye. The damage isn't going to be that much different from this skill anyway. So what Critical Eye does in this game now is it gives a 4% affinity bonus for every point in the skill. Again, very reliable, but weaker than previous games. With affinity, the more you have, the weaker it is. On the contrary, Critical Boost gives 3% damage on your critical hits per level, which is also weaker than previous games, but means that the more affinity you have, the better it is. The break-even point between critical eye and critical boost is 35%, by which I mean if you have 35% or more affinity, critical boost is better. If you have any less than that, critical eye is better. You're probably going to have more than 35% affinity, so critical boost is usually going to be better, but not always. Critical eye is also pretty good as well. Again, it's probably going to depend on what decorations you actually have on you, because that's how you're going to be getting the skill. Those weapon skills, good armor skills. So let's talk about this. In general, if my point hasn't been made by now already, a lot of the skills in this game have been a bit nerfed from previous games. All of them are less good, especially weakness exploit. We're going to get to that in a bit. Two skills haven't though, and they are Maximum Might and Agitator. Both of those skills were decent in earlier games, and now they still are, but because everything else is worse, they're the best in an interesting way. So, what do they do? So Maximum Might, what it does is, for every level you get 10% extra affinity when you are on max stamina for a while. So where is that over here? Yes, so here it is. So 10% affinity while it's active when you have max stamina for a while. This is very good in this game. One, because it's very hard to get high affinity, but also because in this game, knockdowns are a lot more reliable. It's a lot easier to get a lot of knockdowns on a monster, and when a monster is knocked down, you aren't running, you aren't rolling, your stamina is going to be on max, and you'll get the full max might benefit. So, if you're playing Longsword, for example, and you've knocked down the monster, and you do Spirit Helmbreaker, by the time you come down on the Spirit Helmbreaker, your stamina would have recovered, you would have been there long enough that you would get the full max might bonus for your strongest attack. So max might is actually really, really good. Assuming you get 50% uptime, you're getting over 1.1% damage per point, which is very good, which is very nice. And in practice, your uptime is probably going to be even higher than that. Again, most of your big damage is going to be happening when Max Might is active. So, Max Might, really good skill. Honestly, probably one of the best armor skills now, especially since it's only a 2-slot decoration, so it's very easy to fit into your builds, if you have the decorations you need. The other really good nerfed armor skill is Agitator. And so what Agitator does is when a monster is enraged, and when a monster is angry, you get bonuses to affinity and to attack, to both stats, which is very nice. The first and fifth points are particularly good. They add the most. So the first point is a nice one-hit wonder. If you can get the fifth point, that's also really good, but every other point is still pretty decent as well. So just stick as much Agitator as you can. Even with 50% uptime, it's very good. Might be lower, might be higher, but it's always consistent. It's always going to be very nice overall. And the last armor skill that's good, but not really necessary, is Weakness Exploit. So Weakness Exploit used to be one of the best armor skills in the game. Not anymore. What's changed? Well, one, it needs more skill points to come into effect, which is very unfortunate. You need up to 5 skill points for maximum effect, compared to like 3 in previous games. That's point 1. Point 2 is that they've sort of split the effect in half. So, when you attack a weak point, so a point where you already do high damage, you get a nice bonus to critical hit. 5% only at level 1, but at level 5 you get a nice 20, 30% bonus, 30% bonus. Now, also what you do is when a monster is wounded and you attack the wound, you get an additional critical hit rate, which is nice, but the problem is that wounds are very easily broken. A lot of the time, you're going to create a wound and break a wound in the same combo, so you aren't going to be doing that much damage to the wound itself. You're going to break the wound very quickly, which means you aren't going to be doing that much of your damage while the wound is wounded. So, in practice, this means if, say, for example, 90% of your damage is on weak points, and only 20% of your damage is on the wound, you're only going to get 1.1 to 1.2% damage per skill point for the first few points, which is good, but not as good as Maximum Might or Agitator was. However, the last skill point, which it's on screen already, gives an additional 10% affinity on wounds, on weak points without needing a wound. which is worth it. It gives over 2% damage for that one lost skill point, which sort of retroactively makes every other skill point worth it. So if you can get 5 points of weakness exploit is good. If not, it's fine, but less good than Agitator or a Maximum Might. So it becomes a repriority system. Go for 5 weakness exploit if you can. If not, prioritize it less than Maximum Might and Agitator. Now, finally, let's talk about the very best skills in the game. These are skills you're always going to want to get as needed. So the first one is going to be sharpness skills in general. So there's Handicraft, there's Razor Sharp, and there's also Predictive Polish, which is less good but still decent. So the reason for this is sharpness does a lot to your damage. When you're on white sharpness, you do 10% more damage than blue. 10% is massive. Until now, I've been talking about like 1 or 2%, so 10% is huge. If you normally do 50 hits and 40 of those are in white and 10 are in blue, then 1 point of Handicraft is going to be a nice 2% damage bonus. So make sure you're always on white, or on white for as long as you can, and if you need a skill for that, just to get it. If not, skip this point. Skip this step. We don't need too much sharpness. If you don't need the sharpness, it's a wasted skill point. So just do as much as you need. Probably the best general skill for your weapon overall, though, is going to be Attack Boost. And what Attack Boost does is it just gives you a nice, flat roll bonus. Well, points 1, 2, and 3 give nice attack bonuses. Points 4 and 5 give multiplicative bonuses to your attack, which is very, very good. They give 2% and 4% bonus attack at points 4 and 5. This means that points 4 and 5 are very, very good. That being said, points 1, 2, and 3 are also pretty decent as well. So you want to get as much attack boost as you can to maximize your damage. Probably the best skill you can put on your weapon outside of making sure you get your sharpness. However, the best skill overall is actually an armor skill, and that skill is Burst. Burst is probably the best armor skill for damage you can get, particularly at 1 point. So you want 1 point of Burst. The reason for that is what Burst does is when you do 1 attack on your monster, you get 5 raw damage. And 5 is huge, so 5 is 2 points of attack boost. So it's basically 2 of the best skill in the game already. It's very good. That's about 2.8% damage, which is amazing. Now, after you land 5 hits on the enemy, you get a nice further attack boost. At level 1, I believe that's plus 3 more attack for 8 total, which is nice, which is very good, but less impressive and less easy to get than the first hit. So what you want to do is you want to get 1 point of burst at least. The later points of burst aren't as good, especially if you're not continually sticking to the monster. It's another skill that gets better if you're continually attacking the monster. But the first point is the most important point. The later ones are about the same quality of peak performance, like the sort of conditional skills, but 1 point is needed, and very good. And it also improves your element as well, so if you have an element weapon like I have, burst is even better. So always get 1 point of burst. 2 to 5, less good, probably focus on things like Maximum Might instead, but 1 point, get it for sure. So overall in summary, for your weapon, you want to get enough Handicraft or Razor Sharp to make sure you get to or stay on wide sharpness. Then you want to stuff as much attack boost as you can. Try and get attack boost 5. And after that, get as much crit boost or crit eye. Crit boost probably, crit eye is still good if you can get more points in it. Armor is going to be a bit different. So for armor, definitely get 1 point of burst. Best skill in the game. Then get weakness exploit 5 if you can. If you can't, skip this step and get as much Agitator or Maximum Might as possible. You probably won't be able to fit all of these things at once, but yeah, so weakness 5 and then Agitator and Maximum Might. Cool. Okay, so I think that's the main points. So other notes and caveats. Since most of the damage skills got nerfed, that has indirectly buffed a lot of the defensive and quality of life skills. So what I mean by that is, you can get 1% damage from X Might, or you can trade 1% damage for a lot more survivability another way, and that becomes a lot more valid or meta a choice than it would be in previous games. So personally, I've been running through the game with skills that give me more consistent healing, for example. If you're playing the Longsword, Quick Sheath 3 is a really nice skill. That's a 1-point armor skill, so it's very easy to fit in. In Rise, that was necessary. In World, that was useless. So what it does is it makes it faster to do the Special Sheath. In Rise, Special Sheath was your best move. Here, it's not as important, because you have things like your Foresight Wall and whatever else, if you want to counter the enemy, which comes in a lot faster. Finally, fun point is that Foresight counters Activated General Rush in Longsword. So they do boost your damage now, which it didn't before, to my understanding, but doesn't last very long. It's not a very good skill. With that, I think we're done here. I think this is all of the skills that I was going to talk about today. This video took way too many takes because my laptop crashed halfway through the last take. So this is the second take on doing this. So like and subscribe if you're interested. I'll be talking more about builds in the future. I have a lot more miscellaneous weird science videos planned. If you are curious just for a taster of the builds, I will show on screen my set that I've been using thus far. This isn't meta by any means. This is not the optimal build. This is just what I've been able to build with what I've got. It's the best build I've been able to get with what I've got so far. Spoilers for monsters, I guess. But so that's what I've got right now. As you can see, I have all of those skills that I said. So I have max. As you can see, I've more or less followed that priority list that I was talking about. So I've got max attack boost, 1 point of crit boost because that's all I could fit after the attack boost. Max weakness exploit and as much agitator as I can get, and then 2 points of burst. The second point of burst was free because I think it's from the headpiece that had 2 points of burst already. Obviously, I would have liked to trade the burst for the agitator, but I couldn't with this set because I wanted to use one of the set bonuses, the Guardian Arcbelt set bonus, which lets me heal up, which keeps my damage higher, lets me use one of the mantles to increase my damage that way much more consistently. But I'll be talking about that more in the next video. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Take care, and I hope to see you again in the next one. Bye!